Welcome to Bonsai, and today we're going to be repotting this cedar. This is a tree that I've grown from seed over the past 2 years, and it's time to put it into a pot. These are the 3 tools that I'll be using today: some pruners, concave cutters, and some tweezers. The tweezers I use just like a root rake really. I come in and I scrape out the roots. Using tweezers like this is much easier than chopsticks because the angle of the tweezers work really well. As you can see, there's no white tips yet on the roots of this tree, so it's a good time to repot it. We're in early March in the UK, so this is the perfect repotting window. With the tweezers, I can begin to comb out those roots, ripping the crossing roots, favouring those radial roots. Because the tweezers are shaped the way they are, it allows you to really get into the root ball, and also it allows you to get a good grip of what you're pulling so that you don't damage the roots too much. Finally, just removing some of the moss from around the trunk so that it doesn't damage any of the bark. Once I've got all the soil removed, it's time to come look at the roots. You can see this one here is crooked and bent round as it hit the side of the pot. So I'm going to remove that entirely. Next, just teasing out the roots, trying to see what needs to be removed and what should remain. There's another root here that goes at a funny angle. So using the concave cutters, I'm just going to cut that off at the straight point. I want all the roots to be radial and flowing out and down into the soil rather than going funny directions. So I'll continue to remove all the roots that are facing in the wrong direction in favour of roots that are flowing diagonally down into the soil. Once I've removed those crooked roots, I'm just going to come in with some pruners and just cut the root base flat at the bottom. I do this because I want all the roots to be facing outwards rather than growing down straight down into the soil. This helps contribute to trunk flare and makes the tree look much more mature. Here I've noticed there's a root sticking kind of straight up out of the plane of the soil. So again, with the pruners, I'm just going to remove that, ensuring that those lines now flow into the soil. There's a few roots that are still quite high. I want to remove them so that I create a single root plane. Combing them out now, I've identified that there's one more root that needs to be removed. Concave cutters are a great tool for removing roots as they can really help the root cut to be flush. Flush cuts means that as the bark rolls around the roots, it won't create lumps and bumps, and you should still have quite a nice smooth flowing root base. I've seen a lot of YouTube channels where they just take a tree out of a pot and just shove it straight back into its new pot, tangling all the roots up. This really goes against my kind of philosophy or ethos. I really focus on developing a root base first for the trees, even if this means, pruning them a bit too hard and risking losing them. I'd much rather prune the root base hard on a seedling like this, where I haven't invested too much time and energy, and end up with a really nice root base in a couple of years, than just putting it straight from one pot into another. You end up with a really nasty root ball, and then you're not really in a position where you can show off that root base or get any trunk flare. So when developing trees, I always focus on the roots first. Whilst I'm doing that, I try to build the taper in the trunk, and then as that root base becomes established, I can then focus on ramification and taper within the branch structure. So here's the final root base. Next, it's time to create some muck. This muck is basically compost or potting peat mixed with some sphagnum moss. This helps to create a really sticky, tacky tool that you can then apply to the pot to create the walls which will hold the soil. Once it's dried, it will go hard, which will allow the wall to retain the soil over the next few years. Another advantage of adding the moss in like this is that the peat or the soil gets impregnated with moss spores, and the moss will grow through the muck material. This will help strengthen the walls even further. So all I'm doing is just mixing it in, squeezing it hard, and then just adding a little bit of water so it's the right consistency. I don't want it too wet and I don't want it too dry. I'll need it to be able to hold its own weight so that when I begin building those walls shortly, that it won't collapse. It can be quite a messy job creating muck, as you can see. So you may decide that you want to wear some gloves, but as this is just potting soil, it's quite clean, relatively speaking. So now that the muck is made and the roots are pruned, it's time to place the tree in the pot. As you can see, I've got this really nice flat slab, and I'll be placing the tree over to the right-hand side. I wanted to create an island like shape for this tree that will be sitting on top of a hill. So first I need to build up those walls so that when I begin to add the akadama and the soil to the pot, that it won't spill and go everywhere. So the muck, as you can see, I'm just placing it down and building up a wall, and because it's the right consistency, it's holding its shape really nice. I'll continue to slowly build up the wall all the way around the pot before I can then add the akadama soil into it later. This process can take a bit of time. I don't have too many plantings like this. I recently made a moon bowl out of cement, which I had to create some of the walls using muck, and this has a hawthorn in it, which you might have seen on some previous videos. I'm hoping to also repot that one this year. So this is quite a unique thing for my collection, and we'll see how the tree gets on over the coming years. The walls are now getting nice and high, and you can see how I'm creating a pocket for the soil to sit in. I'm pinching the walls and squeezing them so that they're nice and compact and firm, and that allows them to reach the desired height. You have to build it up slowly, because if you build one part of the wall too quick, it's likely to sag and cave in. The whole wall structure supports itself, so as you begin to add more pieces, it is able to then support a higher wall base. Muck can sometimes dry quite hard, particularly in summer, and this can be a challenge to get the water down into the rest of the pot. So for this, I want to make sure that I leave the top part of the pot empty, and I don't cover that with muck also, because there will then be no way for water to get down into the pot. So by leaving an opening, the water can then be poured down into and get into the roots. You can start to see now the final shape that I'm going for with this design. I want to create a hill to the right, and it slowly slopes down to the left. In my mind, this is like an island that you might see on a Scottish lake or something like that, where you have a single lonely conifer just growing on that island, battered by the winds and the elements. So now that I've got the pot to the right height with the muck, it's time to add some soil. This is the soil mix that I use. It's reused soil, which is 50% perlite, 50% akadama, and then a little bit of organic roots and bits left over from repotting. But it's large particles, so the tree should be really happy in its new home. Next, I want to add some drainage screens down onto the bottom of the pot, and this will stop the soil from falling through the drainage holes. The netting that you can see here is just reused from the garlic cloves that you get from the supermarket, and I really like that I'm able to reuse and recycle plastic like this. As you can see, as I'm pouring in the akadama onto the vessel, the muck walls are holding it in place. The right hand side walls are higher, and you can see there'll be much more soil for the tree to grow in here. But overall, this pot is quite large for the tree. I was planning on planting 2, but the second one that I wanted to plant, I wasn't really keen on it. So here's the tree. Now I've got to decide where the front is. There's this kind of nook that bows towards at the base of the trunk, and I had a view that this should really face towards the viewer, almost as if it's growing out the side of the mountain. For this planting, I buried it quite deep, so you won't see that, but once the roots get more mature over time, I can raise that up, and that'll be a really nice feature for the tree. So once I've got the tree settled down into the pot, I'll add some akadama soil around the root base, and then come in with my chopstick and just tease the roots and soil down into it. What I do with any tree is I will lift it up slightly, and this allows then the roots to flow diagonally down into the soil. If I was just to pile it on without lifting it, you're likely to get quite a flat root base, and this doesn't look too good later on in the tree's development. So you can see here, I've lifted it slightly, and then with the chopstick, just teasing the soil down into the roots. I'm now just correcting for planting angle. It had slightly leant to one side, before just patting it all down to ensure that it's nice and snug in its new home. The final step is to get some moss that I found from outside and to place that down onto the surface of the soil. But first, I must hydrate the moss. So I pour lots of water into it and set it aside for a couple of minutes so that the moss can absorb that water and it'll green up nicely. Once that's done, I can apply the moss to the surface of the soil. And this works in a similar way to the muck, where it will stop the soil from falling out, particularly when you're watering it. The moss will grow onto the surface of the soil and just hold everything in place nicely. But unlike the muck that stops water from flowing into it, the moss will allow rainwater and water from my watering can to penetrate down into the soil and ensure that the pot stays healthy, hydrated and moist. Moss also has the added benefit of, when freshly repotting trees, of maintaining that good moisture level within the pot, making the akadama not dry out too quickly. This can often be the case when you're repotting the tree for the first time and the roots are trying to re-establish. You want to make sure that there's a really nice moist environment for the roots to grow in that can be quite healthy. Another benefit of using akadama is that its large particles allow air to get down into the roots. I always find it quite funny because when you think about tree roots, you often think about how they're in soil, but actually they need quite a lot of air to be able to be healthy and remain strong. Also, these root gaps allow the soil to dry out quicker, which as a bonsai artist is a definite advantage because it gives you the opportunity to water the tree more often, and as a result you can fertilize the tree more often. So I'm nearly finished now with this, and you can start to see the final piece coming together. The tree looks a little bit silly at the moment because it's just a stick, but that should grow really nicely in this new home that I've made for it. I think over the next year, when I come to repot it again, I may decide to add another tree to the planting and create a mother-daughter relationship to this pot. But for now, this will be fine. I want the tree to recover, to re-establish its root base, and to grow healthily in the pot. As the roots begin to grow, they'll also grow into the muck walls, and this will again strengthen the walls and protect them from erosion, maintaining that pot shape. So if you've made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. Don't forget to give us a like and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you're new to the channel, welcome. There's a subscribe button in the bottom corner of the screen. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.